Hey guys, it's Bear. It's Friday, October 9th, and this is Life of T-Men. This week's topic is relationships and dating, and if there was ever a complicated topic, it's this one. I mean, I feel like you could probably dedicate an entire channel to this topic if people were willing to share their personal life with you on a week-to-week basis. Because it's so incredibly complicated, first of all, being in a relationship, but especially when you add, or not especially, but, you know, it's just different when you add the fact that one of you is transgender or both of you is transgender. Personally, I'm in a relationship with a cisgender male. Cis, C-I-S, is the opposite of being trans. Trans is anything that switches sides, it's Latin, and cis is anything that stays on the same side. So when we say somebody is cisgender, it means that they identify strongly with the gender that they were assigned at birth based on their anatomy. And transgender is a spectrum, by the way. It's not just somebody like myself who has chosen to actually complete a physical transition or live as the gender that they identify as. There's a lot of different ways to be trans, and that's a whole other video itself. So, being in a relationship with somebody who is transgender, it's its own set of complications, you know. So, for me personally, you know, like I said, I'm in a relationship with a cisgender male, have been for some time, and so when I started to question my identity, my gender identity rather, obviously he was one of the first people that I talked to. You know, it was something that we had always kind of accepted as being part of me, that I was much more male. It was something that attracted him to me in the first place. But when I first started to really question whether or not I was transgender and whether or not I was going to transition and come out, you know, it's something that my partner had to really work with. You know, am I going to be able to see you differently, and am I going to be able to treat you differently, you know? And I would say that for me, you know, in my relationship, that has been a learning curve. You know, my curve is slightly different than my partner's curve, you know, and I think that's normal. It's been something that I've had to have patience with. It's something that he's had to have patience with. You know, you're asking somebody who knows you intimately to see you differently in many ways, you know, and it can be difficult. It offers its own, you know, complications. They have to address you differently. Sex becomes more complicated, you know, especially as you transition. Dysphoria actually shifts and changes. I experienced really bad top dysphoria. And occasionally I'll have really bad bottom dysphoria, and so sex can be like, hey, you know, today I don't want to be touched certain ways, you know, I don't want to be addressed certain ways, and your partner, you know, can get frustrated with that, and that's okay, you know. Personally, I had a conversation with my partner the other day because, you know, I think one of the things that neither one of us necessarily realized was that testosterone doesn't just change the way you look. It doesn't just change the way you sound. You're not just transitioning and presenting as male in my case, but also, you know, the testosterone that I'm taking weekly is changing me, you know, on a much deeper level than that. You know, you're changing yourself hormonally, you know, and the different genders do act differently. They do behave differently in many ways, including how you react emotionally. And that's something that, like, a lot of people want to joke about, like, oh, women are so much more emotional, or, you know, he's an emotional man, he's like a woman. Well, you know what? I can tell you from experiencing being on testosterone for 11 months, this is, today is my 11-month anniversary on T, by the way, that's true. It's not just a joke. I have really changed dramatically in how I react to things emotionally. I used to react emotionally in a really immature way, I think, which also can have something to do with the fact that, you know, I was sort of stunted, you know, as a male and as a female, I matured differently. I had to grow up. That's a whole other topic. But yeah, I used to react to things a lot more emotionally than I do now. And I have talked on my personal channel a lot about how immediately when I started testosterone, I immediately took a step back from that emotional knee-jerk kind of space. And recently, over the last maybe 3 months, I actually had some issues with my dosage where my testosterone was too high and it was causing my body to create excessive amounts of estrogen. So my estrogen levels went way up. And over the course of a couple months, I started to behave and feel a lot like I used to. And that alone told me that something was going on with my dose and caused me to go in 2 months early for my blood work, and I was right. My estrogen was really high. So I can tell you from being this kind of living science experiment that hormones really do make you react differently. And so that's been another thing that my partner and I didn't really expect, and it's causing need for adjustment. He was kind of saying, that I've become really distant, and he was taking it really personally. And, I'm not going to go into details of my personal life. That's something that may or may not be true right now, but it also is something that just on a chemical level happening to my body and happening to my emotions and my brain. And so it's something that, now we have to kind of adjust for, the fact that I do react a little bit more emotionally distantly. And it may or may not be something that couples in general can survive. There's a lot of change that happens here. Like I said, change is a difficult thing to deal with. Change is painful. Growth is painful, whether it's tissue growth or emotional growth or whatever, career changes. Change is painful, all right? And if you're in a relationship with somebody, an established relationship with somebody, that change can be painful for them too. And I think you have to realize that as the person that's transitioning, and try to be patient to an extent, So that's my thoughts on relationships. Dating is a whole other story because, if you're starting out, if you're in this process and you're trying to start a relationship, it really is complicated, If you pass as the gender that you identify as, and you ask somebody out on a date, they're going to assume, in my case, let's say, or for this channel's case, that you're male. And the question becomes, when do you come out to that person as transgender, And I mean, eventually you're going to have to, because, there's anatomy to deal with, You're talking about the fact that you're hopefully, potentially going to be intimate with somebody, and they're going to see your most personal anatomy. And I'm sorry, that's part of what makes us trans, is that we have a body that's different from our gender identity. And people don't want to be surprised by that, and people are not only attracted to gender, but they're actually attracted to, your anatomy. That's a totally legitimate thing. A lot of people want to be kind of offended by that, like, that somebody may identify as being, into, let's just say, into, men. And I'm sorry, some people, when they're into men and attracted to men, sometimes they want to deal with the personality of a man and the presentation of a man, like myself. Sometimes they want to have sexual relations with somebody who has a penis. And there comes a point where you're going to have to warn them. And there's a huge question about, when do you tell somebody in the dating process that you're trans, I can't answer that question. I think that's a really individual thing, but it's one of the things that is a huge issue for trans people. It can lead to a dangerous situation. I think a lot of cases where trans people get assaulted and killed has to do with that right there, and especially trans females, unfortunately, because cis males have this whole stereotype in their head about being attracted to which body parts, and if you have a penis, they think that you're trying to trick them into gay sex, and that's when a lot of trans women get hurt and murdered, and it's really unfortunate, and so it's a really dangerous situation for them, and I think it's a dangerous situation for trans men too. Not to downplay this at all. You know, men can be really, really weird, you know, about who they're having sex with, and they can get, yeah, it can get really weird. Not that women can't either, you know. What am I trying to say? So what I'm trying to say is that, you know, there's a point where you're going to have to come out, and I can't answer what that point is. I've dealt with a couple of dating situations where I've been really honest with the person right off the bat, you know. I can't answer that for everybody. I think it really depends on you. It depends on the person that you're seeing. It depends on how comfortable you are with them, and be safe, you know, in that communication. You know, if you have any concern that the person is going to harm you, you don't want to be dating that person anyway. But you never know. You know, you can be in a relationship with someone for a long time and still not know some of their deepest fears and issues and secrets and stuff. And if that's one of them, it could really, you know, lead to, you know, just a hurt conversation. It can lead to violence, you know. So be careful with coming out while you're dating. So, like I said, I could talk about this for a really long time. Video's about 12 minutes long now, and I'm sorry, but there's a lot to talk about in dating and relationships. So those are my thoughts. You know, good luck, and be safe. And in the next couple of weeks, we actually are going to talk a lot about gender versus sexuality, and gender versus sex, which is like your anatomy. So there will be some more thoughts on those topics, which is why, you know, obviously I didn't want to get into it. So thanks for listening, guys, and I'll see you next week.